As the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel weakens, border towns in the south face a wave of escalating strikes by the Israeli occupation army. The attacks have killed civilians and destroyed homes, while the European Union condemns Israel's violation of international law. Beirut now faces mounting pressure to secure its sovereignty, reinforce its borders, and protect its citizens amid fears of a wider confrontation. Will the fragile ceasefire survive this latest Israeli escalation? And can international mediation prevent a return to open conflict? Welcome to In Depth. Al-Sharq al-Awsat reports that Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon are intensifying, marking a significant shift in the established rules of engagement. While Israel previously targeted open areas to minimize civilian harms, air raids are now reaching residential neighborhoods, vehicles, and public spaces, causing mass displacement and civilian casualties. In recent days, strikes killed 2 brothers in Sheba and wounded 7 others near Bint Jbeil, reflecting a growing pattern of attacks penetrating populated areas. Analysts say that Israel's strategy focuses on subduing Hezbollah, prioritizing the protection of its northern settlers. Israeli media warned that Hezbollah is rebuilding its capabilities while the Lebanese army faces challenges in enforcing disarmament, raising the risk of further escalation along the border, or so claimed the Israeli side. According to the Times of Israel, Israel has warned the Lebanese army that it is not satisfied with its efforts to prevent Hezbollah from rearming, threatening to continue stepped-up attacks unless the situation changes. The warning was reportedly delivered via a US-led mechanism overseeing the ceasefire between the two countries. Israel claimed that Hezbollah has smuggled hundreds of rockets, restored damaged missile launchers, and recruited thousands of new members, actions in violation of the November 2024 ceasefire, which required the group to disarm. Israeli occupation message reportedly emphasized that the Lebanese army is not acting in pace or scale to counter Hezbollah, and that without significant action in rural areas and private property, Israel will continue to use force. Since the ceasefire, Israel has carried out numerous attacks on alleged Hezbollah targets, recently killing civilians in separate attacks. The European Union condemned these strikes and urged both Israel and Lebanese actors to respect the truce and avoid escalation.
Israeli strikes on towns and villages in southern Lebanon have intensified at an unprecedented rate, marking a potential shift in the long-standing rules of engagement. After initially targeting open areas, Israeli air raids are now penetrating deep into residential zones, reviving scenes of evacuation alerts and widespread displacement. Thousands of residents fled their homes following evacuation orders, which were soon followed by airstrikes that struck populated neighborhoods, vehicles, and residential areas across southern Lebanon. Lebanese authorities confirmed 3 civilians killed and several others injured in the latest Israeli occupation strikes across southern Lebanon. Drones and warplanes targeted vehicles and residential areas, destroying homes and forcing dozens of families to flee. Israel's message seems to be clear. The occupation army aims to undermine Hezbollah and push for its disarmament while launching drone strikes on civilians. Yet Lebanon remains grappling with enforcing its arms monopoly, deploying the Lebanese army, and securing reconstruction funds. Meanwhile, the European Union condemned the Israeli occupation army's strikes on Lebanon, calling them a clear violation of the ceasefire and urging immediate restraint and respect for Lebanon's sovereignty. As Israel violates the ceasefire every day, the possibility of full escalation looms, and Lebanon's south is no longer a quiet buffer, but has become the front line of an expanding occupation.
Well, for more analysis, we're joined from southern Lebanon by Ms. Fatima Rislan, Lebanese journalist, and from Cairo by Mr. Khalid Dawood, managing editor of Al Ahram Weekly. Good afternoon to you both, and welcome to In Depth. Let me start here with Mr. Dawood. Now, Mr. Dawood, reports indicated that the Israeli occupation army has abandoned the principle of civilian immunity. Now, what do you have towards this shift in the rules of engagement in terms of re-escalating the Israeli aggression?
Well, thank you, Mona, for having me, and it's good to be with your guests from Lebanon. Let me, of course, point out that, the policy of targeting civilians or being reckless about the death of civilians, whether in Lebanon or in Gaza, has been a constant Israeli policy over the past 2 years, if not more than the past 2 years. But of course, it becomes more alarming when it happens after the ceasefire deal that was signed almost a year ago between Israel and Lebanon, after the Hezbollah escalated its attacks against Israel in solidarity with the Palestinians. And the problem, to be honest, Mona, is that the Israelis, through their behavior in southern Lebanon, are trying to set the tone of how the Israeli army is going to behave, not just on the Lebanese front, but on all other fronts, whether that it be Gaza, Yemen, Syria, or Iraq, or wherever the Israeli army believes that it's necessary to carry out attacks. But in the case of Lebanon in particular, I mean, people are taking this Israeli escalation as part of an attempt to put pressure on the Lebanese president and the Lebanese government to start diplomatic negotiations between the two sides, and perhaps achieving what U.S. President Donald Trump hopes to be another peace treaty between one key Arab country that's been always a frontline state with Israel and the Jewish state, which he would mark, of course, as a major victory for his policy in the Middle East. But the problem, as you know, is that the Lebanese society is very different from other Arab societies in terms of its diversity, and the fact that Hezbollah in Lebanon is not just a militia or a resistance group, but it's also a political party that represents a segment of the Lebanese population, and it will be difficult for the Lebanese government to carry out this task of disarming Hezbollah, as Israel and the United States are insisting, while the Israelis maintain this policy of bombing and intervention within Lebanon. So probably the Israelis and the Americans, we have to say that, are sending the Lebanese government a message that if they are not going to take the action they are requiring in order to disarm Hezbollah, Israel stands ready to start another escalation, while knowing at the same time that Hezbollah will think many times before carrying out any retaliation attacks, because they recognize, of course, that this would result in a massive Israeli invasion or attack against Lebanon, which the majority of the Lebanese people do not seem to support at this point. But this is obviously this daily escalation by the Israelis and killing innocent Lebanese civilians in the south is a determined plan to put pressure on the Lebanese president and Lebanese government to accept signing a peace treaty with Israel.
All right, we'll get back to this point of Hezbollah, but let me go first to Ms. Fatima. And Ms. Fatima, the Israeli occupation army, which already is occupying some areas, or was occupying some areas in Lebanon, it continues to maintain outposts or further outposts within the Lebanese territory, despite the truce which stipulates full withdrawal. From a sovereignty perspective, what options does Lebanon have?
Good evening to you and to everyone who's watching, and to your guest. Mr. Khalid, yeah, from the sovereign track in Lebanon, it is very logical for the Lebanese army to kick out any occupation, Israeli or any other kind of occupation. But with the with the Israeli forces occupying Lebanese land, there are not just 5 points. No, actually, Israel have broadened these points since the ceasefire that was put in place in 2024. And so now they are 7 points and they are connected through roads, and they are more than 13 kilometers of Lebanese land. And when it comes to sovereignty, each army has the right to eliminate any occupation or any military forces from any other country that take control of their land. But with the recent updates and the escalations and everything that Lebanon is losing, and with their resistance and Hezbollah, and then we had the agreement that talked about Israeli withdrawal first and then disarming Hezbollah. And so yeah, we need some kind of balance of power now. And yeah, everyone knows that the LAF has some kind of contained abilities to fight, and they have some problems with the arms where they destroy Hezbollah's arms. And so yeah, the Lebanese capabilities, we know they are not wide, even though they have the willingness. And so yeah, the resistance currently, with everything that they are having and the casualties that are happening ever since the war has started, also they said, according to their Secretary General, that they are implementing the government's decision of a ceasefire. And this is what Joseph Aoun has said. And Lebanon doesn't have any options now but except for one, which is the diplomatic solution, convincing Israel to withdraw from the Lebanese land and handing back the Lebanese detainees and stopping the continued and regular strikes on Lebanon. We're talking about the assassination of an official earlier today in Lebanon, and so everything that's happening so far are some kind of diplomatic attempts. The mediator that comes here to Lebanon and then goes to Israel, they are putting so much effort, but so far we haven't gotten Lebanon's right to have Israel withdraw from the Lebanese land. And there was some kind of diplomatic attempt that has happened lately when the head of intelligence, the Egyptian head of intelligence, went to Lebanon. And yeah, these talks were very positive, and he talked in a way that gives the Lebanon back their right to hand over the detainees and for Israel to withdraw from the land and to stop all these strikes and hostilities in parallel to disarming Hezbollah from all the Lebanese land. And there are some kind of comments that Hezbollah is saying today in light of this initiative, but they don't really have some kind of rules to stand on or to implement to make sure that the Israeli withdrawal could happen in this period, because Israel wants to reaffirm that occupying these lands or these points is some kind of mandatory. And yeah, they want Lebanon to be a disarmed zone, and so Lebanon will only stick to the diplomatic resolution to get back sovereignty over all Lebanese land. But the Lebanese army keeps saying in the talks, they have said that they cannot deploy in all of the Lebanese land because of this occupation. And so yes, we are waiting for the Lebanese response and the Israeli response to the latest Egyptian initiative. And so yes, we can reaffirm again that there is only one way to go about this, and it is the diplomatic solution in getting the help of the Arab and Islamic countries to remove this occupation from Lebanon and stopping their strikes.
Right, so we're speaking here about diplomatic efforts and mediation. Let me go here back to Mr. Dawood. And Mr. Dawood, you spoke about the Israel's warning, accusing the Lebanese army of failing to prevent Hezbollah from rearming and warning of more strikes that could follow. Now, how do you interpret this threat? And from your point of view, would that give a pretext for Hezbollah not to disarm? What do you think the Hezbollah response would be?
Well, again, Mona, I mean, I think it's a joint warning by the Israelis and the United States, because we've all heard the statements of the U.S. envoy to Lebanon, Mr. Tom Barak, openly threatening the Lebanese government and the Lebanese presidency that if they did not move, Israel will have to do the action itself in order to achieve this target of disarming Hezbollah. While, I mean, there is a lot of debate about whether the agreement that was reached between Lebanon and Israel a year ago included the total disarmament of Hezbollah, or simply removing the Hezbollah bases and weapons from the southern parts, basically what they call the south of the Litani River, which is a kind of a borderline that's always been very active in terms of Hezbollah attacks against the Israelis. So now the Israelis and the Americans are saying, no, we just do not want the disarmament of Hezbollah in the areas south of the Litani, but we want the full disarmament of Hezbollah. And of course, we cannot take this pressure out of the context of the overall Israeli escalation against Iran and all its so-called proxies in the region since the Gaza war started. And that's one area where the Israeli government, along with the United States, think they've managed to achieve some major progress in their efforts to contain Iran, to weaken Iran, and to weaken Hezbollah, and to weaken Hamas in Gaza, along with the Houthis in Yemen. So again, that's part of the new order which the Israeli Prime Minister is trying to establish in the region. And if we add to that the removal of the former Syrian regime that used to support Hezbollah and was in very close relationship with Iran, I think the Americans and Israelis are trying to tighten the noose against Hezbollah, because, as we all know, weapons were being smuggled on a regular basis from Syria to Lebanon, which is something I don't think Hezbollah will deny. And according to the Israeli and American reports released recently, they have alleged that there were already attempts by the Hezbollah to restore some of the weapons it lost during the war between Israel and the Lebanese party. But so far, these reports cannot be confirmed. But generally speaking, it's very obvious that the Israelis and the Americans are very intent on using all measures in order to weaken Hezbollah, including putting pressure on the Lebanese government, because, as we know,
but here, let me ask you,
Lebanese parties agree on Hezbollah practices and policies.
Right. If I may ask you here, Mr. Dawood, is or are those actions and threats by the U.S. and the actions of Israel would really help in disarming Hezbollah or cripple the Lebanese Authority from carrying on with the mission?
To be honest, Mona, I mean, disarming Hezbollah is not necessarily the priority for the Lebanese people. The priority is, as our colleague from Lebanon said, is to end the Israeli occupation of the various parts of the Lebanese territory, and to stop this, arbitrary policy of giving themselves free hand to violate Lebanese airspace, to kill Lebanese civilians, and to even go into some government offices in South Lebanon. As we have seen on Thursday, there was an expanded military bombing campaign in which civilians were killed and not the alleged targets of Hezbollah. I think besides also, of course, the issue of the economic recovery on Lebanon, which is something very much needed. I mean, it's all interlinked together. I mean, it's not one issue only that will help Lebanon overcome its crisis. And always, I'm sure the Lebanese government is treating this issue of disarmament of Hezbollah very carefully, because they know the internal implications of those kinds of moves. Because, as I mentioned, the Hezbollah is not just a militia, that has some 20 or 30,000 fighters. It has popular support. They have members of parliament. They have members of the government.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to say, hey, we are going tomorrow to remove all of Hezbollah's weapons. So if the Americans put a similar amount of pressure on the Israeli side to restrain themselves and to stop bombing Lebanon, I think this will provide a much better chance for the Lebanese government to press ahead with the issue of uniting the weapons available in Lebanon and restore stability and security in Lebanon. But as long as Israel continues its military action inside Lebanon, I think this will always weaken the effort to reach agreement on this very thorny issue of disarming Hezbollah that has carried the burden of resisting Israeli occupation since 1982.
Right. Let me take this point to Ms. Fatima. And Ms. Fatima, reports revealed that the occupation army or the Israeli occupation army issued warnings to civilians to evacuate buildings it deemed linked to Hezbollah infrastructure prior to strikes. Now, how effective or lawful are such warnings under the international humanitarian law from your own perspective? And we were speaking here about those Israeli warnings. Does this give a pretext to Hezbollah to not to disarm? Could this weaken or cripple the Lebanese authorities' abilities to disarm Hezbollah? What do you think?
Yeah, let's talk about how these warnings happen and when they happen. I want to confirm that the Israeli military attack southern Lebanon daily, and also and we can say that only southern Beirut is the only one that is kind of safe from these, and they were attacked, yes, in the previous war. And so the Israeli attacks are continued in daily, and on some days around 7 or 8 were killed daily. But yeah, when it comes to the warnings, yeah, they have some kind of psychological effect more. And so when the spokesperson of the Israeli military warned the civilians in Lebanon to evacuate these places where they are staying, this day was crucial. In Lebanon, there was a meeting for the arms, and this is what was agreed upon with the Lebanese government in a timeline or a time frame that ends with the end of 2025. And also Hezbollah had an open book that they have sent to the 3 official presidents, the president and the head of House of Representatives and the minister, and they said that they won't get in any direct or indirect negotiations with Israel, and they think that the from Lebanon negotiating, they could reach some kind of new agreement apart from the one that they have reached in 2024, and they may get Lebanon to compromise more, and such compromises also have to do with Hezbollah's disarmament and their role in Lebanon in general. And so yes, these were some kind of responses to Hezbollah's statement, and they were some kind of threat in a message to them. And then threatening the civilians is also a message, because Hezbollah being in southern Lebanon and in Lebanon generally, their presence hasn't changed. And so yes, they want Israel wants to threaten civilians because they carry out strikes daily where they harm the civilians. And so this, as I said, is some kind of a psychological message internally that Israel doesn't accept Hezbollah's role, and they say reduce the pretext of Israel defending themselves. And this was actually in the agreement that was signed in 2024, but also it gives Lebanon the right to defend themselves. And so this is a message domestically, but also internationally. They are saying that this is some kind of diplomatic solution to protect themselves. And so yes, the threats could also be, or the warnings could also be, an international message to show that Israel is violating the agreement and the ceasefire, and they are using all the possible pretexts to protect themselves. But if we say that we are actually avoiding the civilian casualties because Israel actually is bombing civilian buildings, and maybe they were reconstructed after the war, and the people in these residential areas that have displaced, and then they got back and had their homes and houses destroyed, and then went back and reconstructed them and held on to them. And so here Israel is threatening the civilians that they cannot get all their belongings in 10 minutes or 15. And
Yes.
so this is psychological harm.
Yes.
And these families
Miss-
have children who are in schools. And
Yes,
so
Ms. Fatima, if I may ask you here, does those threats weaken or cripple the Lebanese authorities from being able to disarm Hezbollah? And then would that create a kind of pretext for Hezbollah not to disarm? And then what would be the consequences of that?
Yeah, when it comes to these warnings or the daily strikes, Hezbollah also think that they have the right to keep or to keep their arms with these strikes that are carried out daily, because the agreement says that Israel has to withdraw and to stop the airstrikes after 60 days of implementing this agreement. And for more than 8 months, Israel had to withdraw and to stop these strikes. But we also have another problem internally, a Lebanese problem, which is when Hezbollah says that as long as these Israeli strikes are there, then Lebanon has the right to defend themselves, and this is what Hezbollah says they are doing. And in the latest open book that Hezbollah have showed, they said that they have the right to defend the Lebanese army and to defend the civilians, even though there was a decision about the disarmament that the Lebanese authority took, but actually went back on. And so yes, here we have a problem. Do we hand over Hezbollah's arms first and then have the Israeli forces withdraw, or to have the Israeli forces withdraw first and then disarm Hezbollah? And so yes, it's been a year now, and we still haven't decided Israeli withdrawal first or Hezbollah disarmament, and there isn't a final decision here.
Clear. Mr. Dawood, the EU has condemned the Israeli strikes as violations of ceasefire. Do you believe this European stance will be translated into concrete diplomatic pressures or into deeds that would make Israel obliged by the terms of the agreement? What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, Mona, whether in the Lebanese fire or the Palestinian Gaza issue, I mean, it's the Americans who are running the show. I mean, the European position, of course, is important. For a country like France has always been historically close to Lebanon. It has some influence within Lebanon, but I mean, again, the United States has always, tended to limit the European contribution to the situation in Lebanon, to the financial aspects in terms of economic recovery in case the war stops. But in terms of political influence, the ability to pressure Israel to stop its violations and aggressions against the Lebanese people and the Lebanese South, I think it's going to be very unlikely, except if those efforts were coupled with those of influential regional Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, who are very influential in the Lebanese file. And of course, those countries, Europe, along with the influential close U.S. allies in the region, perhaps they can convey in the clearest way to the U.S. President Donald Trump that giving Israel a free hand to bomb in Lebanon and to bomb in Israel and to bomb in Gaza and to kill Palestinians and Lebanese people without any accountability, it was basically provides ground for the rise of groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas, because at the end of the day, as long as the occupation continue, we are going to see those kinds of acts of resistance.
Clear, very clear. Very clear. That was Mr. Khaled Dawood, managing editor of Al Ahram Weekly, and Ms. Fatima Rislan, a Lebanese journalist. We thank you both for your valuable insights. And I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode for In Depth. Many thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.